Hi, I'm Mandy Grass, the family behaviorist, and these are three of my favorite little humans.
Hi, I'm on this podcast. Let's do this.
Let's do this. This is the behavior blueprint where we can figure out why kids do what they do.
Is that why parents yell sometimes?
Sometimes, because parenthood is messy, behavior is complex, but with the right blueprint, we can figure it out together.
Yeah!
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Behavior Blueprint. My name is Mandy Grass. I'm a behavior analyst and a parent coach and the voice of the family behaviorist. You might have seen some of my stuff on TikTok or Instagram. My background is in behavior analysis, and I use those tools to implement parenting techniques with my own children and many of the families I work with. A little bit of my background: I was a special education teacher, and I worked at a school for kids with severe disabilities, and that's when I became enthralled in the science behind behavior analysis. For example, the first time I ever realized I wanted to be a BCBA, I had a student. Now, remember, we were at an outplacement school for kids with severe disabilities, and he looked me in the eye and he spit on the floor. And of course, my first reaction was like, go get a tissue and clean that up. This is unacceptable, right? That's what my parents would have said. And I'm going to teach this child that that is unacceptable. And everybody I was working with yelled at me. And they said, this is an attention maintained behavior. We're going to ignore it. And of course, in all my 22-year-old wisdom, I was like, ignore this behavior. He just spit on the floor. But I was young, so I stopped and I listened. And that behavior went away in 3 days because it was attention maintained. It was in that moment that I realized perhaps I didn't know everything about behavior and parenting. Could you imagine? So that's when I realized I really wanted to understand more about behavior analysis. I have been a behavior analyst since 2015. And in that time, I have had 3 of my own children. I talk about them a great deal. I have Lola. She is 9 years old. Parker, she is 7 years old. And Marley, she's 4 years old. So I'm a single parent, but I also have a new partner in my life, and we have blended our family. So my home can be a little chaotic sometimes because he has 4 children and I have 3. So half the time, our home has 7 children ranging in ages from 16 years old to 4. So we have a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 4-year-old. So I can tell you, I know what you're going through. As for the babies, I've gone through that as well. But I'm right there with you. I am a do as I say, not as I do person. I am a real mom. I screw this up all the time. I do not walk around looking for behavior to occur and being like, oh, I know the answer. Just like you guys, when something happens, I respond to it. When my daughter steals a candy or doesn't put her book bag away or loses a cleat or says a swear, just like you guys, I say whatever it is I'm thinking. We do not do that. Absolutely not. And that might work sometimes, but sometimes it doesn't. And that's where I put my behavior analyst hat on. Ultimately, understanding your child's behavior is all about looking for patterns. You want to see something occurring again and again. We are all entitled to an off day every now and then. So I certainly don't walk around analyzing my children. I take the behavior as it occurs. I respond the way I naturally would, and then I adjust as needed. The point of the Behavior Blueprint podcast is to give you guys as much information as possible. The family behaviorist was born in 2022. My youngest daughter was born in 2021. And once I was done having children, I knew that I wanted to find a way to give more information to the parents who were struggling just like I was. I work in a public school, and I have since 2015. As a behavior analyst, I work with kids from 3 years old up to 21 years old. I promise you, there is no behavior I have not seen. I have been hit, I have been kicked, I have been sworn at, I have been called incredibly creative, offensive names. So there is nothing that you're going to come to me with that I will be shocked about. I promise. Beyond that, in all of my years of working with kids, I have not met one jerk. Can you believe that? Listen, kids have trouble with their behavior. They have trouble navigating different situations. We just need to get at the root cause. And sometimes they require more therapeutic interventions or a different approach, ideally therapeutic and behavioral combined, but we will figure that out as we go. I also have a background in public education. I still work in a public school 2 days a week, and I was a certified special education teacher as well. So this all comes into play as our children's behavior starts to impact school, as you get the emails and the tiered intervention, all of that. So please use me as a resource to help you navigate the systems that you are in. Okay, so this is our first episode. You're listening to me ramble, and I appreciate it so much. I hopefully will get better at this, but I wanted to talk through the basics. In behavior analysis, every behavior has a function. If you follow me on Instagram or TikTok, you know that I am a broken record about this. And as we get into this podcast every week, you're going to hear me talk about function. There are 4 functions in behavior analysis: attention, escape, access to something tangible, or automatic or sensory. It is imperative that we understand these 4 functions because every behavior we engage in falls into one of these 4 categories. Let's break these down a little bit because these are going to be our building blocks as we talk about all the behaviors that occur. Attention. Attention can look like many different things. It could be the kid who you're sitting helping them with their homework and you walk away and they start crying because they want you to come back and help. It could look like the teenager who's like, and rolling their eyes at you and like very irritated with being around you. Let me let you in on a secret. We're going to talk a lot more about mad behavior is usually attention seeking behavior because if they really wanted to get away from you, they wouldn't do it where you're likely to respond. So attention-seeking behavior can look very different. It can look like the sibling shoving their brother because you come over. It could look like ripping a paper because you're going to fix it. It could look like the kid that's incredibly clingy and won't get off your leg. Attention-seeking behavior looks like a variety of different things, but it's important to keep in mind why the behavior might occur. Escape maintained behavior. Growing up, my sister had a stomach ache every time we had to clear the dining room table. Could you believe that? I think that was an escape maintained behavior. Sneaking is usually an escape maintained behavior, or lying. I'm going to lie because I'm going to get out of whatever's going to happen. Really, it's getting out of a situation. A kid that escapes by saying they don't have their equipment or walking out of the room when they're asked to do something. The third behavior is access-based. This is the toddler that refuses to drink anything other than the pink cup. This is the kid who throws a tantrum for a lollipop. This is your teenager who just wants access to their phone. Access-based behaviors elicit coming in contact with something literally tangible. The last category is automatic or sensory. What I mean by that is that a child engages in something because it internally feels good. There is no external reinforcement. So, I have a daughter that's a thumb sucker. That is an automatic behavior. She does not even think about it. She sucks her thumb. However, I have another daughter who will come up to me and look me dead in the eyes and put her thumb in her mouth. That is not an automatic behavior. That is not a sensory behavior. She wants my attention because guess what? The thumb sucker usually gets a lot of attention because I'm constantly telling her to take it out. One of the big things when it comes to these 4 functions of behavior is that it is not determined by what's happening before. It's determined by what happens after. And it doesn't matter if we think that we are not giving it attention, right? If you have a child who is screaming at the top of their lungs in the car, they're singing a song, they're being really, really loud and obnoxious, and you're like, I am not attending to it. But the little sister is laughing. Well, guess what? That is still probably attention maintained. As we get into this podcast, as I take questions and work with real families, we're going to break down these functions over and over and over. But I'm always going to ask you what you think the function is, and I'm always going to help you to determine that function. It is essential that we understand that in order to implement change. That brings me to my next point. When we're talking about functions of behavior, we need to teach a replacement behavior. So one thing our parents did was like, they want my attention. I am not giving them any attention. I am going to ignore that behavior. Lovely. Get it. Makes sense. However, have you ever had a child that was engaging in an attention-seeking behavior and you have decided to ignore it? And 3 minutes later, you're shocked because they've upped the ante. They are now throwing things. They're now screaming louder. Well, When we remove our attention and we don't outline how to get it back, when we don't replace what they're currently doing, a child will up the ante to figure out how to get that access. So, when we are talking about any of these 4 functions of behavior, including sensory, we need to teach a replacement behavior. What do you want them to do instead? Now, let me give you an example about this. Sensory can be one of the hardest ones, right? So I have my 9-year-old has ADHD. She is loud and proud about that. This is not a secret in this family. We are very excited about our diagnosis because it comes with this magical brain that is the most creative person I've ever met. However, when she watches TV, she would hang upside down by her toes if she could. She broke 2 coffee tables. And back when this behavior started, my gut reaction was we are turning off the TV if your body can't be still. So it took me a little bit of time, right? Remember, I looked for those patterns. I responded the way I thought was appropriate until I realized this is an automatic behavior, right? This is a sensory seeking behavior. So I switched gears. I gave her a replacement, right? Instead of saying, stop hanging upside down, I paused the TV and said, your body is telling you it needs to move right now. Your choices are to go jump on the trampoline or go ride your bike. I want to be super explicit. So I want to replace what's happening, being on top of my coffee table, breaking it, hanging by your feet. I want to switch that and replace it with something more appropriate. No worries. Your body needs to move right now. I love that. Here's where we can go do that. This drastically reduced this behavior. Beyond that, it did something called generalize. Generalize is where you teach something in isolation and then it goes to other parts of your world, life, any of that good stuff. So at generalize, we were out to breakfast and Lola looked at me and was like, my body needs to move right now. I love that. Oh my goodness, that is so exciting. Go move. Ultimately, I don't want to teach her just to sit still. I want to teach her to recognize what her body needs and to replace it with something more appropriate. Crawling through the chair at breakfast wasn't going to be appropriate, but going outside to the grass and running around for a minute totally is appropriate. So that's where this replacement behavior comes in. So when you're talking to me about your child and they're hitting and you think it's attention maintained, okay, we want to teach them to ask for the attention. We want to teach them to recognize that they need attention, whatever that might look like. Same thing with escape. You have a child who wants to escape every single time. This is going to sound a little counterintuitive, like the child spitting on the floor, but we're going to want to teach them to escape appropriately. I used to work with a student in kindergarten who would run out of the classroom. And he wanted to escape, obviously, right? He wanted to get out of that classroom. And so I gave him a break card that he could use whenever he wanted to leave. And everyone was like, you're letting him leave. I am, because this is step 1. I'm replacing running out of the classroom with requesting a break. Once we get to a great place where he's requesting all day, probably because it's getting honored, and he's not running out of the classroom, then I can start something called tolerating or shaping. Then I start saying, okay, first we're going to sit on the carpet for 1 minute, then we can have a break. And we're going to systematically work on this habit or skill. Same thing applies to your children at home. My daughter used to ignore me when I would call her name. And one day I said to her, why are you ignoring me? And she said, because you're going to ask me to stop doing what I'm doing. So she wanted to escape the demand that I was going to give her. So, oh my God, okay. Well, how about this? I need you to respond to me and say, yes, Mom. And if you need a minute more after you've responded to me, you can say, can I do it in a minute? So again, I built in that escape. She no longer needed to ignore me because she knew she was going to be able to access whatever she was accessing, or she was going to be able to avoid me in that scenario for a little bit of time. So when we comes to behavior, we really want to get into the nitty-gritty of what the behavior looks like, why is it occurring, and what do we want them to do instead. A big part of this is teaching. I think sometimes our generation gets so fixated on, I need to respond to behavior. I need people to see I'm responding to behavior. I need to put boundaries, punish, whatever that might look like. Listen, I am not an anti-punishment or consequence girl. I am. But I want to caution you that we need to teach them as well. We really need to teach our kids what to do. So rather than stop doing that, okay, stop doing that and instead do this. What does that look like for them? So those are a couple of things that we are going to explore on this podcast. I am going to be here every week, hopefully. I have lots of big ideas about having guests on or having people call in, all of that good stuff. I can't wait to watch this evolve with you guys. I appreciate you guys being on this journey with me. It is very exciting. I know a lot of you follow me on TikTok or Instagram, and I know you have many podcasts to choose from. That's some of the intimidation about even starting a podcast. But my hope is to really bring you real life problems as they occur and real life solutions. One of the things you need to know about me is I do not have it all together. Please do not expect perfection out of my children. If you follow me on TikTok or Instagram, I show you a lot of my real life and exactly what it looks like. And it is not perfect. It is chaotic and beautiful and fun. We have a lot of fun. But I know it because I live it. Somebody asked me the other day, where do you get the content ideas from? Just my life, my 3 children, or the 7 children in this home, or their friends, or my job, or the sidelines at the soccer game. You are not alone. There has not been one thing that a parent has come to me about in the 3 years that I've been doing this where I have been like, "Oof, nobody else has ever asked me that." It can feel really isolating. It can feel really alone. You are not alone, and I'm going to help guide you through how to put some evidence-based strategies in your home to make things run a little bit smoother. A couple of other topics that we will dive into. My 9-year-old has ADHD. Like I said, I work in a public school, so we talk a lot about that. What does that look like? What are the strategies involved? We talk about a lot of other disabilities, dyslexia, executive functioning disabilities. My background goes into a lot of that, given I was a former special education teacher. So I am really excited about this. You guys can join. I have an online subscription service where we'll be talking about the podcast weekly. You can submit questions. You can ask follow-ups. I am in there interacting every day. So please consider joining that. That is my club. And you can find all that information on my website at thefamilybehaviorist.com. Listen, subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting, all of that really, really helps me. I am new here, and to be honest, I'm completely intimidated. So, I'm used to talking. As you can tell, I talk too fast. You can already leave the comment. I know it. Continue to tell me it. I will continue to work on it. But I appreciate you being here, telling your friend, sister, neighbor, mom, brother, brother-in-law, cousin, sending them this to listen to would mean a lot for my small business. So I appreciate you guys, and I look forward to this podcast journey.